All right, what's up, y'all? I'm here with another lesson in my Intro to Modular Synthesis series using VCV Rack. And today we're going to continue on with the trend of talking about some basic sound design techniques that you can use in VCV Rack or elsewhere. And they're kind of fun to demonstrate in VCV Rack, so I do like doing this. But yeah, we've talked about subtractive and additive synthesis. Today we're going to talk about FM synthesis, which is another one I really, really like. So FM stands for frequency modulation. So as you can imagine, we're going to use the frequency modulation input of some of these VCOs and make some magic happen. All right, so in the world of FM, they have a couple of terms that they like to use, carrier and operator or modulator. The carrier refers to the oscillator that you're going to be hearing, which is going to be this setup right here. This is our carrier oscillator. And the operator or modulator is a separate oscillator that you don't hear that is affecting the FM of the carrier oscillator. So it's going to be this setup right here. So we're going to dive right in. I do have my handy dandy little spectrum analyzer. Beautiful. I'm doing the Lage Lund chord today. Just I'm feeling it. Yeah, if you're a jazz person, you maybe know who Lage Lund is. Great guitarist. He plays this chord voicing a lot. And thought it'd be fun to do that one today. Why not? Yeah. So I've got a couple things going on. My little frequency or spectrum analyzer, so you can see the frequencies represented on the spectrum, kind of see what's going on with harmonic information. I've also got a couple of scopes, so we can look at our carrier oscillator and our operator. So I'm using a couple of modules you maybe haven't seen yet. This is a useful utility module, the split module from VCV Rack. What it does is it takes a polyphonic cable. In this case, I've got the 4-note polyphony going, so you can have that nice chord voicing. And it's going to separate it into a bunch of different monophonic cables. Because if I sent all 4 of these sine waves into the scope, it would look like a hot mess, would be unintelligible, and not really good for learning purposes. So I've got both my carrier and operator oscillator represented as the red and blue, respectively. So you're just going to see one note from each, generally the lower note, so you can kind of see what's going on with these waveforms. I also have my volt per octave patched to my modulating oscillator, as well as my carrier, so that they're going to be in tune with each other. So you can see that right there in the scope. They're playing the exact same sine waves. Now I've got my attenuator set to 0, so nothing's happening yet. We're just hearing the regular old sine wave coming out of our carrier. And FM synthesis can get kind of mathy, but we won't get too mathy with it today. We're just going to kind of listen to it and enjoy what happens. So basically what's going to be happening is the sine wave output of my modulating oscillator is going to fluctuate the frequency of my carrier oscillator in such a way that it's going to create more harmonic content and alter the sound a little bit. This technique is really useful for doing all kinds of stuff. It's really cool for, making big, bright, cool, or sometimes crunchy synth sounds. It's also good for making inharmonic sounds, like more strange percussive sounds. Inharmonic basically talks about sounds that, and we talked about the overtone series and partials in the previous lesson. Inharmonic sounds have overtones, probably a lot of them, but they're not exactly following the rules of the overtone series. The partials are detuned, moved around in clusters, which results in having more metallic sounds, more sounds that you would hear maybe in more percussive elements like bells, wooden objects, metal objects. So this is a really great technique if you're trying to recreate inharmonic stuff, just using regular oscillators. And we're going to look at some of that too. So first and foremost, I still have my attenuator set to 0, but let's see what happens whenever I slide it up a little bit. So there are a couple of ways you can apply FM. There's exponential FM or linear FM. Exponential just means you're going to be going based on the exact amount. It'll increase exponentially the amplitude of how much the modulation is happening. The problem with exponential is you can get out of tune very quickly, because if you're going up and down, if your base sort of fundamental frequency is like 440 and you go up an octave and down an octave from the modulating oscillator, the average pitch is not going to be the same as the pitch you're playing. So you're going to get a detuned effect. It's going to go out of tune essentially. And you can correct that if you want to, but this is very useful if you're doing the inharmonic sounds. Then there's linear FM, which basically keeps the oscillator, the carrier oscillator, the one you're hearing, in tune by following a linear path of applying the FM. It's a little, again, I'm not trying to get too mathy, but basically linear is better if you're trying to make sounds that are still in tune with what you're playing. And exponential is going to take things out of tune and increase it exponentially. It's useful for other stuff like percussive sounds. Right now we're set to exponential. This little button right here, this LFM, switches it from doing linear versus exponential FM. So here's what happens when I hold this chord and I start to turn the attenuator in exponentially applying the FM from my modulator. Turn it nice and slow. You can hear the pitches bending. Ooh, look at that scope. Our carrier oscillator is wobbling. Keep going. It's a little crazy sounding, a little avant-garde, but if you keep going to maybe around, somewhere around like, probably like a little over 50, look at that. Cool. So now we're kind of back to playing the original pitches we were playing, but now there's all this extra harmonic content, higher octaves, some sub information. It sounds a lot richer, right? It's really cool. And again, my modulator is exactly in tune with the notes I'm playing, as is my carrier. But around the 50% mark, you're gonna, with exponential FM, you're gonna get it back in tune with itself. It sounds really cool, right? Let's do single notes. Ooh, man, nasty. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now let's look at what happens if you do inharmonic. So if you slide this guy all the way up, it's gonna probably result in some more inharmonic sounds. I'm gonna play some single note lines, higher octaves. Ooh, listen to that. And if you look at the frequency analyzer, the little spectrum analyzer at the bottom, look at all that really sharp and high volume harmonic content happening up top. Sounds bell-like, right? It's nice with reverb, right? Ugh. Ugh. But yeah, this is more the enharmonic sounds you can get using FM. Now, haven't really even gotten too far into it. I'm going to bring this back down to about that 50 or so point mark. It's like... There we go. Another problem you can run into, they call it the through zero problem, is when you're fluctuating the FM, oscillators aren't really going below 0 hertz. So if your modulator is wobbling to such a degree that it is, going up maybe a couple octaves and down a couple octaves, but you're playing a low note, it's not actually going to be able to go below 0 and hit the negative range and stay symmetrical. So it's going to result in some pitch issues. There are ways to work around that. Not in this case. So in some cases, you might find as I play lower notes, they start to get out of tune, or vice versa. But we won't run into that problem too much, I hope. So I've got it back around to like 50 or so. I like it right there. That's nice. Let's bring it down an octave. Now, another fun thing you can start to do with this is play with the modulating oscillator's pitch relative to what you're playing. So I have an octave module quantizer, which I've talked about a little bit. Let's see what happens whenever I just move it up and down a couple octaves. So this is the same octave that I'm playing on the keyboard. Down an octave. Ooh. What about down another octave? Let's go nuts. You can hear the intonation as I go lower is starting to get really bad, right? Yeah. All right, let's go up an octave from where we started. Up another octave. Ooh, that's a nice one. This has more of a wobbling effect too. What about another octave? Another octave. kind of nice. You can also adjust it stepwise, which is why I put, the quantizer here. So what if it's not playing the same exact note? Like, what if we raise it up a couple semitones? You're definitely going to run into intonation problems here. But there are some cool effects you can make if you do things in, slightly more perfect intervals like fifths and fourths and stuff. Like this one's kind of gnarly. I like this. Fifths are kind of cool. Sounds like an evil deep bell or something. Ugh, I like it. Cool. Let's set this all back to starting point. Now let's try this doing linear. So I'm going to hit this little button, bring it back. So linear is going to work, and it's going to keep it in tune with itself as long as you are only applying a little bit of modulation. So no modulation. I'm going to turn this up just a little bit. You hear the pitch isn't changing. We're getting the added harmonic content from frequency modulating it, but it's not going out of tune yet. If you go too far, it will. And you will run into the problem of if you go too low or too high, past zero or past the limits of the oscillator, you'll get intonation issues. But right here, no issues whatsoever. Totally in tune. You can hear the intonation a little bit. It's a little low. Now let's mess with the pitch of my modulator. Up an octave. Yeah, this is up 7 semitones, and look, doesn't sound too wacky, doesn't sound like it's out of tune with itself. Ooh, this is nice. Modulator up an octave and a fifth. Cool. So yeah, I don't want to, we could spend all day experimenting with stuff like this, but I don't want to get too crazy. Let me reset some of this. I'm going to put this back to exponential. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it in linear, just a hair. But now I'm going to try and modulate my modulating oscillator. So I'm just going to introduce another VCO setup. And I'm going to put this in linear as well. Bring this up just a little bit. Actually, I'll play a chord before I do that. So here's, just a smidge of FM with the linear mode. This is without it. Now I'm going to introduce some FM to my modulating oscillator, the one you can't hear, but it is going to affect the carrier, of course. It's a little hard to hear. Oh, I have this set. There we go. Oh. Whoa, weird, right? That sounds nice. Bringing the second modulator up a couple octaves can introduce a little more of the attenuation without it messing with the intonation too much. Except when you get low, because you're running into that whole 3-0 problem again. Cool. That's without it. Just adds like a little, just makes it slightly more complex and gives it a little more life. It's kind of nice. And again, fun thing about this, you can experiment with this as much as you want. You can have 10 oscillators, you know, FMing each other into oblivion if you want to. It would require a little more fine tuning in order to make it sound a little more musical, but yeah, you can get nuts with it. So that's kind of the basic of FM synthesis. And you can also experiment with doing different waveforms. I was using all sine waves to oscillate. A really interesting one, which, you know, yeah, I'll go ahead and show a little bit of it. Really interesting one is square waves, especially if you adjust the pulse width. You can do some really cool stuff with it. Setting it back to 0. It's a little brighter, right? But check out what happens when I mess with the pulse width. The pulse width, if you look at the modulator scope, you can see the square wave. This one deal right here would be a pulse. So this higher point, if you adjust the pulse width, it's going to make the higher point a shorter amount of time versus the lower point being longer, or vice versa. So that's a cool way that you can change the sound a little bit. You hear you can hear the effect it has. And imagine if you assign an LFO modulator to this guy, so it's always kind of slowly changing. I'm gonna turn the FM here off. Cool, right? Yeah, just changing the octave, moving the pulse width around to kind of hear what it does to the sound. Ooh, you can hear that inner voice movement. That's really nice. Cool. I mean, I can play with this stuff all day. It's so cool. But yeah, so that's kind of the basics of FM synthesis. Really, I mean, you can go nuts experimenting with this stuff and see what kind of cool sounds you can make. But I do want to show you one thing real quick down here. I'm going to mute this channel. Unmute this guy. I already have set up. This is a really amazing module I use all the time. It's a great oscillator from Bog Audio. It's an FM operator. So this basically has what this all has going on built into it already. So you have like a frequency ratio, the ratio of the carrier to operator. And this is just really handy because you can, you know, achieve the sounds that you're doing with all this in just one nice little module. And it also has some other stuff built in. Actually, let me patch my guy into here. Ignore the scope, but we'll still look at the spectrum analyzer. So right now it's just putting out some basic sine waves. I haven't done anything. You can slide the frequency. Add feedback. The feedback would be basically coming from the modulating oscillator, the extra added harmonic content. This is a super, super wonderful oscillator. I use this thing all the time. But yeah, maybe as a little bonus, I set this up because I wanted to talk about AM synthesis, because why not? AM synthesis stands for amplitude modulation. So we're going to kind of apply the same principle. We're going to take an oscillator and its sine output and use that to modulate the amplitude of our sound. So I'm going to run the FM operator through this wonderful little VCA module, the voltage controlled amplitude module. And I'm going to send in this sine wave. Now you can see it's going absolutely crazy. That's the idea. The amplitude is getting sent all around at the frequency this guy is set to, which I have patched to the same volt controlled octave. And we'll hear how it affects the sound. Let's listen. Bro, all right, so this is without, this is with it. Gonna increase the offset a little bit. I'm using a tenuverter and a gain module because the output of this is only going from -5 to +5, and I kind of want it to go up to 10, sort of 0 and 10. So I'm just using this module to offset it a little bit. Cool. Now let's check out what happens when I adjust the frequency of my modulator. If you bring it all the way down, you're sort of getting kind of more of like a weird tremolo effect. But as you bring it up high, it's cool, right? It sounds a lot like FM synthesis. It kind of feels like it has the same effect on it, but you are getting a different sound result. Different sidebands, different harmonics. Ooh, I like this sound a lot. There we go. Sorry, I'm always trying to fine tune this guy. Nice. Ooh, cool. Yeah, so that's all for today's lesson. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I hope to catch you in the next one. That's FM synthesis, y'all. Have fun with this one.